some things with you, open it up to question and answer, but I wanted to just pose a question really literally right at the outset here.
The mic's off.
Mic is off.
Oh, you know what? It's not off. It's just it's down low enough so it might not be catching your voice when you turn your head.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I should flip my notes. There we go. It's going like in and out a little bit, I think.
You want to just use this?
Yeah, that works. That's fine. Okay. Thank you. But so really at the outset, I wanted to get just your input on one issue. And it's going to sound a little silly, but it is me. What do you think? What do you think the criminal justice system and jails and prisons should be used for? Anybody? Yes.
To safely put away people that are not safe for society.
Okay. So to put away people that are not safe for society, I would think. And rehabilitate people who commit crimes against society. Commit what types of crimes against society?
Anything from robbery to murder.
Okay, robbery and murder. All valid. All perfect. All what I would think, if you were to ask anyone in the United States, poll anybody, you would ask them, what do you think our criminal justice system is being used for? What is its purpose? And they'd all say the same thing, just what you guys said. It's being used to take dangerous, bad people off the streets, keep them away from us, rehabilitate them if we can, but to make us safe and secure. And I think we all sit there and say to ourselves, okay, well that's our country, that's what we stand for. That's not what's happening though, folks. It's something that's been going on for quite some time. It's happening right underneath our nose. Pat referenced it a few minutes ago. The numbers are staggering. I want to just walk through just a couple of general numbers here to sort of put this in perspective. But underline this is that our criminal justice system, our prisons, our jails, are not doing what the vast majority of the people wanted to do, but yet they're unaware of that. And that's one of the main things we've been trying to do. Other people are trying to do that as well these days. People talk about it in regards to mass incarceration. We talk about it in terms of unjust incarceration. And we particularly talk about it as it impacts the mentally ill. We talk about it a lot. But underlying it is this notion that the system is not being used properly at all. Absolutely not at all. And here's where it all plays out. These numbers that I'm going to just walk through, a handful of them here, they're absolutely staggering. So you would think, once again, using logic, you would say to yourself, okay, this is the United States. You know, we pride ourselves in freedom and justice. These horrible countries that are sprinkled throughout the world, Russia, you know, parts in Africa where their governments go up and down on the hour, it seems. Horrific places that you hear over and over again, the stories in Iran where they execute people, Saudi Arabia where they will execute people for different things. What do these numbers look like? Well, these numbers are something that we all should be embarrassed about. We have 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's jails and prisons. We have 25% of the people in jails and prisons throughout the world, and yet we only have 5% of the population. And the only other countries that come within half of our incarceration rates are Rwanda and Russia. Now, you know, you say to yourself, okay, well, you know, that sounds strange, but I guess that means we have a lot of violent people. Those numbers don't play out either. Those numbers don't work for us either. If you look at the studies, okay, and I have a really cool graph. I don't know, I gave Ben Alb about 2 minutes to put this, my changes together. I keep changing whenever I talk about this stuff. There's a really cool graph. It's a line graph. And what it shows is that basically from 1900 to about 1950 or so, here we go, right here. This one's fantastic. If you look at it actually goes to 1900 at some point, but from 1925 until about 1980, the number of people in prisons and jails was pretty much flat. It was pretty much the same thing. It didn't go up much. It was around 200,000. You'll see in 1980, the explosion starts into where it peaks in 2013. There's been a little bit of a decrease, not a lot. My only point here is, okay, as a country, for the longest period of time, our incarceration rate was pretty flat. It's pretty much the same thing. What happened in 1980? Did we all of a sudden become the most violent country in the world from 1980 to 2000, and did we all of a sudden become this horribly violent country? No, the numbers don't show that either. Did we have upticks in like the late 80s, early 90s? Yeah, we had some upticks there. But what you will find now that has been going on, and Ben, can you put that slide back up there again? Actually, the one you have there, yeah. This shows us against the other countries that I've mentioned around. And if you go back to that one you just had up there, what you'll find has occurred since then. This is since early 1990s. Homicide rates have fallen by 51%. Forcible rapes down by 35%. Robberies down by 56%. Aggravated assaults down by 45%. So how is it then that we can have an incarceration rate that's going like this, and the number of arrests going like this for the violent offenses? What's happening, and what we have seen so dramatically at our place, is that our criminal justice system is being asked to be something that was never thought of, was not supposed to be ever. It's the place where we now house vast majority of the mentally ill who are not getting treated, are going into the criminal justice system, and people who commit inconsequential crimes. They're being swept in as well. And so underlying it is what I mentioned at the very top of the discussion here. We have a criminal justice system throughout the country, not unique here, which is not being used for the purpose it was designed for. And most of the world does not know it. All the numbers support it. As they say, the incarceration rate is atrocious, but yet at the same time, our arrest rates are going down. The number of violent crimes being committed are going down. And it is, mind you, it is very tricky. I live in the city of Chicago. It is very tricky with the violence that we have going on there right now and have for about the last year or so to talk about violence numbers going down. But with all violent crime, most people will tell you this, they go through some degree of cycles and there's little blips, but as an overall number, most of the crime data shows it's all going down throughout the country. So what is occurring? What is occurring, as they say, is that it's misusing the criminal justice system for low-level offenders, people who are being cycled in on crimes that none of us would be concerned about, retail thefts and criminal trespass cases, and things like that. But the largest chunk we see, and to me, the group that is truly the one that is the most outrageous are the mentally ill. And why do I say that? Think about this for a second. When most of us hear about the word Dickens, Charles Dickens, Dixonian, I can't recall anybody saying, oh my God, those were glorious times. I just remember, God, that was phenomenal. It was such a beautiful period. No, when you think about that, you think about what Dickens wrote about. You think about jails and prisons that were filled to the gills, mental institutions that were more like dungeons. You hear all these horrible things are going on there. Think about this for a second. At that period of time, what do you think the average person living in that period thought about? They probably thought that they were somewhat enlightened, good things are going on, we're making progress here and there, that we're going to be viewed by posterity in a pretty favorable way. Anybody that I know, they're not alive, who is alive at that point right now would be someone who'd be reviled because of the way that they treated the least. I truly fear that 100 years from now, people are going to look back at our generation and say to themselves, those were those horrible, horrible people that were locking everybody up, particularly the mentally ill. Because that's what's happening right now. It's what's happening. And what has been difficult for people in time since was for me to get my arms around it and go, well, how could this occur? It's been a slow progression, and that's really what I want to talk to you about today. This progression, and the progression of people being dumped into jails and prisons. I say it's happening throughout the country. It's not unique here. But where are we dumping them? Well, we have some photographs here that are interesting. Ben, do you have any of those ones on? I promised Ben I was going to make this really challenging for him today. This is Division 1 of the jail. We're actually getting ready to shut it down, thank God. But these are sort of like what average cells look like. And so when you think about what we're doing, when I'm talking about dumping mentally ill into jails and prisons, you're not dumping them into places that were designed to be therapeutic settings. They weren't. They were designed to be jails and prisons. And yet, this is the type of environment that people are being put in. So it's not even as if we could sit there and say to ourselves, well, yeah, through oversight, through no one's real ill intent, people are being dumped into jails and prisons in these massive numbers, but they're being put in good places. They're being put in jails and prisons. Jails and prisons that were not designed for them. Jails and prisons that were designed for the people that you guys talked about earlier, that are supposed to be used for bad people. bad people who are hurting people. And instead, we're putting people in them who are sick, who literally are sick. No different than if we decided, and with the way our legislature and our government in Illinois works these days, I wouldn't put this one by them, but no different than if we decided tomorrow that we're going to start criminalizing diabetes. We're going to say, you know what, we're really tired of those diabetics. We're tired of that, so we're going to criminalize that, and we're just going to start swooping them up. Of course we wouldn't do that. But then why is it okay to do it for the mentally ill? And it's truly what we're doing right now. What I want to walk you through were some of just the statistics, because the statistics bear it out. And what Ben's thrown up here, I've always found fascinating. Look at these headlines here. I mean, many of them from the Tribune, but from all over the country, really. This isn't something that just dropped out of the sky yesterday. These are headlines from the 1980s about what has been going on. So this has been a sustained slide into where we're at. And it's occurred over decades, but it's really come to sort of a head right now. And what I'm hoping is that with that, there's going to be some calls to change what we're doing. The numbers, though, the numbers I referenced before. We used to have a pretty robust system of state hospitals for people mentally ill. Mind you, I'm not overlooking the fact that many of them were really bad. They were the subject of many investigations, and there was a lot of good reasons to either A, shut them down, or B, fix them. Okay, so a lot of good reasons for that. When the movement went on in the 50s to do that, it was because of really good people coming forward saying, listen, we got to treat people who have mental illness more thoughtfully. And so there's this whole thoughtful approach that was going to be laid out, and we shut down the hospitals, and we start putting people into the communities, and we start working in a community type program. It actually started under President Kennedy, and the more we had looked into it, it's just staggering about the sequencing and how everything played out here. But this graph here gives you a really, stark example, depiction of what has been going on. So since 1934 to 2001 is the scale here, but as you can see, people at mental health hospitals went from the level that is about 600,000 down to right now it's negligible. And at the same time, the number of people with diagnosed mental illnesses that go into prisons has replaced it. And when we first came across this chart that was based on numbers that we were working with, we were blown away about just how it was a complete mirror image about what was going on. So it wasn't as if there was this massive change in the number of people who had this need for some mental health type of treatment or setting. We just decided to do it a different way. Instead of doing it in hospitals, we're going to do it in prisons now. But no one gave people in the prisons and jails the memo, by the way. They just did that. And the sequencing of it was amazing. It started with President Kennedy. He had made a big push to change the way we were dealing with the folks who were mentally ill. Many tragedies involved with his assassination. But one of them was that he did not get to the second part of that, which was to sustain people in the communities. They went about dismantling the hospitals. He had an elaborate plan. We found some incredible video footage of him speaking on this issue, and it was shortly before he headed out to Dallas. So it was one of those things where we were on the cusp of making some really good changes, and we didn't do it. And then from that time, the Vietnam War followed immediately after that, and people were not really interested in the notion of a lot of spending in this area because our spending was going into the war. And then this issue just sort of faded away. And when it faded away, this is what has occurred. People have ended up in prisons and jails, and these astounding numbers. As I said, the number of mentally ill people in prisons and jails is 10 times the number remaining in state hospitals right now. Here was a number that I found just to be absolutely incredible. In 44 of the 50 states, the largest mental health provider, the largest hospital type setting is a jail or a prison. In 44 of the 50 states. And that's the case in Illinois. I'm the largest here in Illinois. On any average day, I have usually in the neighborhood of about 2,300 to 3,000 individuals who have diagnosed mental illness in the jail. And that's going on, as I say, throughout the country. 44 of the 50 states have that. And for most of them, mental health funding for communities and the like has not ever been robust. It really hasn't. There's been cuts going on throughout the country. But in Illinois particularly, ours has been atrocious. For the last 10 years, we have seen incredible cuts in Illinois. The present budget, but once again, as I say in Illinois, when we talk about present budgets, I don't know if it's any point talking about it. They don't really seem to plan on having a budget ever. But the present one has additional cuts of millions of dollars to mental health treatment as well. So this is something where the cuts that we have seen have been devastating, and they're continuing on the state level. The state has shut down some of the few remaining mental health hospitals that they had. They had one out in Tenley Park that they shut down. The city of Chicago had 12 mental health clinics, and they shut 6 of those 12 down as well. Once again, giving no notice to anybody about that, not doing it as a result of a study saying that those areas were overserved, they did not need service there. None of the above. They just were looking to save money, so that's what they did. They made cuts there. Community Mental Health Council, the largest mental health provider on the south side of the city of Chicago, lost all of its $20 million of funding. And so at the end of the day, when you have faced cuts like this and having basically government, our society, walking away from this, where do people end up in? Well, they end up in jails and prison. And how is that? Think about the logic here. I mean, the logic is unmistakable. So you have someone who's suffering from a mental illness. Those are horrible challenges, but with proper treatment and proper plan together, so many people operate no different than anyone else on any given day. But it requires a thoughtful plan. But when you pull out all of the services for people, and with families struggling like they do, then it creates all sorts of crises. And so many of the people that I talk to that are in jail, many of the people we have in there, are folks whose families tried valiantly to work with them. And when all the support services were pulled out, things started crumbling with the family. There's only so much the family can do. So the ones that happen, many of these people end up on the street then. What happens when people end up on the street? Well, clearly by that point they've usually lost their job. They now don't have a place to live. They live on the street, and eventually then they will come in contact with the criminal justice system. This is all so logical. This is all so easy to connect the dots. This isn't any type of higher math here, folks. So they come in contact with the criminal justice system, who, mind you, and it's been recently shown in the most difficult way in the city of Chicago. Law enforcement, once again, was not supposed to be engaged with this area. Okay? This was not what police officers had signed up for. So now all of a sudden, they're facing a heightened number of people who are in distress because of mental illnesses that aren't being treated. They weren't trained to deal with it. So what happens? A lot of the issues of violence in trying to deal with people who are going through some type of crisis. But then the other part of it, which is more insidious, because this happens all the time, they just get scooped up. They just get scooped up. They're doing something that is, in fact, a criminal violation. But honest to God, I had the sneaking suspicion I'm not the only one in the room. That on my way here today, there was at least once or twice where I did not use my directional lane, change lanes. Okay? I have sneaking suspicion a lot of people in this room have done one or two of those things in their life too. Could you get pulled over for that? Yeah, you could. You violated the law. Should we pull everybody over all the time and pull everything? Of course not. That's not the society we want. Nor is it a society that whenever anyone violates any law, we just arrest everyone all the time. That's not thoughtful. It's not thoughtful. It's not something I'd let my children do. But yet, law enforcement then, they're presented with something they weren't set up and prepared to do, so they bring people in, they arrest them. But once again, crimes that in any way jeopardize anybody in this room, jeopardize saying, oh God, no. We call them crimes of survival. That's really what's going on. They're stealing something to eat. They're frequently, because I'll talk to a lot of these things, they'll steal stuff, they don't even know why they're stealing it. It's an aerosol can of something. It's not even something to feed themselves at times. It's weird. It's things that just make no sense. They'll steal something. Or we'll see people all the time on criminal trespass where they're breaking into a place to sleep. And frequently the big one is over at O'Hare Airport. We get people all the time being brought into our custody because they're being arrested because they go to O'Hare Airport to sleep, and eventually they end up in our place. So the direct result of all these cuts and this lack of thoughtfulness, people are being swept into the criminal justice system throughout the country. Horrible things are happening at different times when law enforcement comes in contact with someone, and they end up rotting away in jails and prisons for no reason. The numbers are, once again, when I first became sheriff, my predecessor was an amazing man, but the criminal justice system has changed dramatically just in the last 10 years. our database for our system, our management system for the jail, telling me who's in there and who's not in there, was a DOS-based computer system. It was amazing I could tell you who was in the jail, let alone what their issues are and what we could do with it and so on and so forth. Now with our ability to actually have functioning computers that can tell us a lot, we're able to actually see who's in our jail, what periods of times, and how often they're cycling in and out, and we do all sorts of really neat things. We set up a Sheriff's Justice Institute about a year or so ago where our whole focus is policy-driven ways to try to impact the criminal justice system in a thoughtful way. And it's been harvesting all the data that we have and using it to try to come up with solutions. In doing that, though, we find a lot of things that are outrageously disturbing, particularly as it applies to the mentally ill. We find that they sit in the jails longer than anybody else. Once again, any mystery here? Of course not. When they have a bond set for them, the judge sets maybe $1,000 bond, so they need to come up with $100 to get out. It might as well be $1 million bond. They're homeless. Their family and them have been separated for what they'll tell me often for really good reasons. They're really bad to their family. They have no one that can come in there and give them $100. They don't have a job. So what do? They sit in the jail. And once again, are they sitting there because they're violent people, type of people we want in the jail? No, they're in there because they're mentally ill to start with, and then they're left in there because of indifference, and they sit there. And when you look at the numbers, they're staggering how long compared to someone who's not mentally ill sits in the jail. But then once again, you do the logic on it, it all makes sense. So then once again, what are we up to again? We are now not only just incarcerating mentally ill, we're going to penalize them. We're going to hold you longer than someone who's not mentally ill. Why? Because we can, I guess. We, as I'm going to explain a little bit, have done a lot of changes in how we deal with people who have mental illness. But most jails, and I can't say enough to you, it's not that, we're good, other people are bad. No. Think about it for a second. When someone signs up to be sheriff, they're, most of them have law enforcement background. I was an attorney, I was a prosecutor. Most of them have a law enforcement background. They're under the distinct impression that they're signing up to be sheriff. They're not signing up to be head of a mental health hospital. And so a sheriff's mentality traditionally is, okay, I get a court order from a judge. It says to hold this person because they committed an offense. I feed them, I take them back and forth to court, and then I got an order to release them. What they do when they're with me, if they're not hurting themselves or somebody else, I don't care. What they do when they leave, I don't care. What they did before they got here, I don't care. Is that because they're bad people? No, they're not bad people. That's what the job was supposed to be. I never looked at it that way, so it was a little bit different from the get-go. But our whole thinking was like, okay, if we're going to have this thrust upon us, we're going to have these poor people dumped into jails for no good reason, then we're not going to treat them like prisoners. Because they aren't. They're not criminals. They shouldn't be treated that way. We're going to treat them like patients. And so for us, ours was just a bunch of different steps we took, but underlying all this is a change of our mindset that we're going to treat people as if they're patients and try to work with them before they come in, when they come in, and when they leave us. And the whole underlying concept there was to treat them the way that they should be treated. And when we look at the numbers, as I say, of the people we have in our place, it's absolutely staggering. We have actually had the same type of trends that have been going on in the country as far as overall jail population, because once again, Chicago is a little bit of an anomaly right now, folks. I guess for people outside the country, that's good for them, but for us living there, it's really bad. But crime trends are all going down everywhere. So we've experienced a lot of those issues up until very recently. So I'm shutting down not one, not two, but 3 of my divisions in the jail. And part of it, though, is because we got involved with a really robust home monitoring program. So instead of people sitting in the jail cell, they have bracelets on their legs and in their houses, and they're going back and forth to work and things like that. We used to have only about 400 people on that program. Now we have over 2,500 people on it today, So we've gone about trying to figure out different ways to deal with it, but we've shut down different divisions because our population's been decreasing. What is the only division of mine that is not decreasing? My acute mental health division. And that's at 120% capacity every day, meaning that there's numerous people that are sleeping on the floor. And that it doesn't change. With all the other populations are decreasing, that one keeps going up. And the number of people that we have in our mental health programs keep going up. And so we saw that, I saw that immediately. We decided to change our way of operating and change our way of dealing with the people that were going to be coming into our custody. And once again, I truly mean this sincerely. This isn't a criticism of the other folks. The other folks had this mentality of, you know, got the order to hold them, they were releasing, that's it. What that meant though, particularly for the mentally ill, and I saw this in my first year of being sheriff, we'll get orders to release people. So we accept about 300 new detainees every day, we release about the same. The orders come at all different times. There's not necessarily a rhyme or reason. The majority of them will release around 5 o'clock or so, but many other ones for a myriad of reasons. Either the order came late, the case went late, someone came in to bond them out late, the person had multiple cases, so it took longer to process them out. Whatever the reason is, when I first became sheriff, whatever you mean, we got the order to release, we released you. Many of the mentally ill, when we get the order to release them, they just went out the door too. Many of the people will leave our custody at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, middle of the winter. That, once again, that was the order, said release them. It didn't say, Tom, wait until it's thoughtful. It said release them. So what I saw happening is mentally ill detainees, some of them who hadn't even stabilized yet, are going out the door, standing out around the sidewalk, wander around for a while, and eventually they'll just fade away. But that was the plan. That was our society's plan, to discharge them. And all of these different things, they came to a head for me not because of any lawsuits or something like that, I just knew it was wrong. And so we decided that this was something that we were going to change from beginning to end. I have a couple of case studies of some people that I was going to just reference to you before I mentioned some of the changes that we made here, but they sort of actually, I guess, put a bit more of a face on it here. I don't know if you have these folks on the video. Oh, the video? Well, let me play this video for you real quick. It's a short one. It's only 5 minutes long, but it's one of the guys talking about, you know, his experiences.
Always best to go. Always had a caseworker who called to check on people. The restrictions was always available. He always had counseling. Now that most of them are closed, you don't have that. You have nowhere to go.
Before they closed it down, I was able, like Deborah said, to have a place where I could go and communicate with my counselor. And you know, me and my counselor got kind of cool. And once they shut it down, I had nowhere else to go. And unfortunately, I had to start self-medicating myself. So I tried drugs, alcohol, and things of that nature. And now for help.
The clinics closed down, so people not really getting that help they really need. So it's kind of hard. Everybody needs help.
That's what this program is about. Trying to do better. Looking for change. We're trying to keep ourselves out of situations that got us here in the first place, which is the best thing ever. The resources they give us, the advice they give us, the instructors that come in, the guest speakers, I mean, it's all uplifting. It gives us hope that once we get out, hopefully we all get out, that we will never come back here again. Most jails are revolving doors. You go in, they let you out. You go back out doing the same thing that got you in there because you have no resources. No one talked to you, no one told you where to go, no one told you what you can do. Basically, you just have to tell you what you can do, not what you can do. And this program is giving us a lot of opportunities to change all our lives.
If I take my medicine every day, I'm functional, I don't commit crime, I don't do drugs.
Stop cutting funding. Stop. Just stop it all together. You got men, women, even kids who started to be young men and young women that need this help, that need the opportunity to better themselves and get their mind right, stay off the drugs and have counselors, have people to talk to, so you find yourself on drugs, on the street, in and out of here, in and out of this revolving door they call the county. No one wants to be here. No one wants to be here. But then they want to complain that jails are overcrowded. Jails will be overcrowded if you help people from staying out of it in the first place.
When they shut down the mental health facilities on the outside, it was like they turned their back on the people that have mental illness.
Without this program, I'll still be the same person I was a month ago, angry, frustrated. But because of this program, I feel better about myself. I'm happy that somebody blessed me with another chance.
Those are some of the detainees that we recently, we try to interview these guys a lot to try to get their stories out. And it's interesting, it's mostly men, but the number of men in the jail is about 90, oh God, I have so many numbers in my head. 90-some% of the jail population is male, 90-some%. But percentage-wise, much higher level of female mental health issues in the jail, much higher. And the acuity level, the women coming into jail is off the charts. That's something too, we haven't been able to figure that out, but it is something that is, we're trying to drill into right now. I just wanted to give you 3 quick stories of individuals, their backgrounds, just really short. Then I was going to tell you about what we're doing, and then I was going to open up for questions that I've already over-talked, which I do frequently. This individual, his initials are MH, her. She was homeless and pregnant. She stole 2 plums and 3 chocolate bars from a Save-A-Lot. She told the police she took them because she was pregnant and she was hungry, and she was pregnant. She has a history, her history is all retail thefts, stealing under $50 at a time. While she was in my custody, she delivered a baby girl, which was then placed in foster care. She spent 135 days in the jail, and that cost taxpayers just under $20,000. This other gentleman, D.E., he was charged with trespassing on O'Hare Airport. He has 28 arrests total. All of them are for trespassing at O'Hare Airport. In the past 3 years alone, he's been booked at our jail 8 times, and has spent 190 days in jail, once again, all for trespassing at O'Hare. He constantly gets released on I-bonds, which means you don't have to put any money up, but he never shows up for court, which, is there anyone in this room would expect somebody who's severely mentally ill, who's homeless, to have as the first priority for my day is, when is my next court date? Of course not. I mean, of course that's not going to occur. So he then violates it, and they put a warrant out for his arrest, and then he gets arrested out at O'Hare Airport again. And then they set the bond last time at $1,000, which I mentioned before to you. He's homeless, without a job. Why not make it $1 billion? You can't come up with $100. He was evaluated while he was with us and was found unfit for trial. He was then sent out here to Elgin to be fit. He was with us 86 days, and that was just over $12,000 it cost us. And then this other gentleman, he had 61 arrests in the last 15 years. All of them are for retail theft, candy. He's a diabetic, so he steals candy. Last time he was arrested for stealing 8 packs of Snickers. He spent 114 days in our jail, and that cost a little over $15,000 as well. So those folks there are pretty much the norm. That's the norm of the population I'm talking about. We have a huge population of people there who are mentally ill, who are on small, low-level offenses. We have them all the time. They cycle in and out, but as I mentioned before, they stay with us longer because they have no ability to bond out, they don't have family, you name it. So what did we do? First thing I attempted to do when I came in and saw what I had in my hands here was I tried to divert people front end. So I hired mental health professionals who interview individuals. So when we get the 300 plus people dropped off every morning, my mental health professionals, they interview them real quick, try to find the mental health status, and we then look through our jail housing records, which doesn't violate any HIPAA issues because we're just looking to where they live, which will tell us frankly what their mental health status was. We put it all together, give it to the public defender, to give it to the judge, to argue that they should be put in some type of alternative other than jail. And I worked with a bunch of mental health providers and nursing home providers who agreed to take people in this fashion. I would put bracelets on their legs, we would watch them. Our judiciary has never been known to be particularly bold. They have not taken me up on this. So I still do it. We still interview people. When we interview them, the stories are astounding. As I say, particularly for the females, it's very disturbing because the acuity level when they first hit us that morning is really, really bad, really bad. So then, once we checked off the box and we tried to do the diversion that was not being had any interest from our judiciary. Then it was about the treatment of the people we had in our care. We completely redid the treatment program so that people in our care have a whole myriad of treatments that they're offered while they're with us to try to make them better. I launched a hotline there that's operated, a 24-hour hotline operated by mental health professionals to deal with individuals who get released from my custody who are going into some crisis, so we can walk them through it. At times we'll send a car off, drive them to the hospital if they're having a bad day. We work with their families. If they're home with their families, and it's a crisis, they call us up. We work with them there. We also have family support groups that we run, and we invite the families in to work them through the issues that they can anticipate, the issues that might lead to problems down the road as well. We started an office of mental health policy and advocacy that sort of oversees a lot of this. I gave all of my correctional officers at the outset advanced mental health training. So it's a 40-hour program that they all get so that they, as a correctional officer, know how to deal with someone who's mentally ill in a jail setting. All of my police officers on the street get what's called CIT training, which is crisis intervention training, so that they understand how to identify someone who's in crisis, identify issues in regards to mental illness, and then how to de-escalate. And then in many cases, how not to arrest people, how to get someone to a hospital as opposed to arresting them. And the other thing, I put a lot of things together on this one, was obsessed with was the fact that people would leave me and what services were out there that didn't have insurance. And so we've signed up about 13,000 people for the Affordable Care Act down in the receiving area now. So many of the people with mental illness now leave, they have actually insurance, so they can go to some places they never could before. I opened up a place that we call our mental health treatment center. So they're sort of first in the country. It was a boot camp we used to run. Boot camps were the rage back in the 80s. There was virtually no statistical evidence showing they did anything above normal programs at all. The only thing that they were different about is that they were outrageously expensive to operate. So we ended our program and we moved many of the mentally ill out to it. And my goal was to put them in a more therapeutic setting so it doesn't even look like a jail. So it's surrounded by gardens. There's fences, but they're way back, and they live in Quonset huts and things like that. They get loads of treatment while they're out there. And so the goal was to move about 800 or 900 of them out there. We haven't been able to move them out there yet because our health provider, which I actually am one of the only sheriff in the state who doesn't pick his health provider, the county board picks that for me, which is really thrilling. So they can't staff it. So I haven't been able to move people out there full time yet, but they're out there. We have pretty cool programs for them, gardening, photography, other things, and we have job fairs for them, and the whole notion is get them ready for the outside. And with that, everybody who's leaving now gets a discharge plan put together for them. And so in the discharge plan, because a lot of these folks obviously don't have iPhones and the like, a lot of it's paper. But what it is, we know where they're going back to, because most everyone who comes into our custody ends up going back to the place they came from. We sort of heat map it for them. We put together all the different areas that are going to be important for them. So we put together the pharmacies, the bus lines, the places they can go to get treatment, and then once again we put our hotline on the bottom. If they have problems getting to their treatment plans, we'll go there and we'll get them to the appointments and the like. We also have set up on the south suburbs because there was a complete desert out there as far as services goes. There was only one provider, they're fantastic, but they kept getting cuts. So we opened up a mini clinic in the courthouse out there for individuals to come in who have been released by our custody who need services. We're a week or two away from opening up one of the 6 clinics that the city of Chicago closed a couple of years ago. We're reopening it, we're going to run it. I rearranged my budget. My budget hasn't exploded. It isn't as if my budget now, all this is being paid for by a credible amount of money that I'm getting from the taxpayers. I've kept my budget the same. I just frankly cut other jobs that were that important. So we got that opening up. We've got a partnership with a hospital right now that we're kicking off. We have a mobile unit right now that we use primarily to get people back and forth to appointments that can't make them there. But we're having a second one, which is going to be much more robust, for lack of a better word. It's going to be a crisis bus that can go anywhere. It's going to be fully staffed by a mental health professional and a deputy who's trained in mental health to get out there. And the van is being purchased by a family whose daughter we helped. The daughter had been in and out of the criminal justice system with mental health issues, and we stabilized her, and knock on wood, she's been stable now for 4 or 5 years, which her family, their way of thanking us, we weren't looking for them. They wanted to buy us a van for use of some of the stuff we're doing. So we have all sorts of different plans and programs we have going on. Our biggest challenge is always our housing, trying to find housing for people when we leave. That is something we've been working on. At times we'll be able to rent beds for people with a temporary situation. And we continue to work on a lot of different plans here. So we feel pretty excited where we're going right now. We put a template together, we send it out throughout the country. We are seen as the leaders in the country on this issue, and we have people from Los Angeles, New York spend a great deal of time in our jail trying to figure out how we're doing it. But we keep adding to it, and we have no end in sight. We want to continue to add more and more to this, because underlying it, truly, folks, is the fact that this is something we all should be embarrassed about. And I know myself, I'm not at the end of my days going to sit there and feel bad that I didn't do anything about it. We try. Whether we succeed or not, whatever. But we are objectively making people's lives better that should never have gotten involved in the criminal justice system in the first place. And so there's a lot we can do. We hire, it's interesting, I had someone call me just out of the blue. Apparently there's going to be, I think, a job fair out here soon. So we're hiring correctional officers, but we also hire mental health professionals as well. So we are always looking for good people who want to come and work with us, and we have a decent turnover as well, so we have the ability to hire people. But folks, this is something we can do. This is very doable, and we can do something that will make people very proud of our generation instead of looking down upon us. So thank you very much, and I'd love to answer questions.
I was just looking at the racial makeup of the inmates there. I wonder if you could explain or somehow what's the meaning that you make from how disparaging the makeup is? 85%
Oh, yeah.
person of color?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's I think it's 87%, 88% of the people in the jail are Latino or African American. It's about 70-some% African American, almost a little under 20% Latino. Those numbers are always the same. I mean, since I've been sheriff, it hasn't been changing. It's always the same. The issues there are intense. One of the things that as I say, we started using data a lot. In some of this is just pure common sense. Where people are getting arrested, it's where they all end up going back to. So we have like 5 zip codes where the majority of the people are going back to. If you actually take the time to look into those communities and look at what they have, you find these communities are in outrageous distress. Some of it can be created by some of the violence. Obviously, no one that wants to open up a business in a place with a lot of violence there, but this is like this vicious cycle. And we have loads of things we're working on. I'll tell you about one of them, but I'm not one of these goofs that come up here and just tell you anecdotes, But this one I thought was interesting, only from the standpoint of the logic behind it. I was talking to an inmate 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years, whatever. And I asked him, I always talk to the detainees, I'm always like, hey, how are we treating you? Treating you okay, that type of stuff. And so this guy said, when are you getting out? He said, actually, sure, I'm getting out real soon. I'm going to get out this week. And I said, oh, that's fantastic. You guys have treated me well. I go, do you like it? He goes, no, I want to get out. I'm getting out. So, great. And so I said to him, I go, what are you going to tell me? It was not accusatory or anything like that. What are you going to tell me that's going to lead me to believe you're not coming back? And the thing that was cool is he didn't just like that. He thought for literally 10 seconds. He sat there and thought. And he looked at me and said, Tom, I'm probably coming back. And it's like, no, why is that? You told me you want to be here. You told me you had two kids you need to take care of. He said, Tom, I'm not blaming anyone, but when I left my community, there weren't a lot of jobs. Now I got a felony conviction. I probably won't get a job. I can always make money selling dope. And you guys will probably end up catching me, and I'll probably be back here. And I remember he walked away, and I remember thinking to myself, that wasn't illogical. It wasn't like he's sitting there saying, I can't wait to get out, I want to hurt people, I want to shoot people. No. He was saying, my goal is to survive when I get out. And so those numbers are staggering, they're horrible. They get even more out of control when you start filtering the mentally ill in there too, because where are so many of the services being cut in a lot of the communities that need them? And so then my mentally ill population jacks the numbers up as well. well. And so for us, we're constantly trying to come up with ideas that are a little bit different to really go at that. And so what I did is I took what was like my boot camp population and I turned it into this program we call Renew, which is pretty cool. We teach guys how to operate, not heavy machinery like big trucks, but sawzalls and jackhammers, things like that. And what we do is we go out to communities that have these abandoned properties all and been sitting there for decades. We go, we tear them down. Our guys are taught how to recycle, what's recyclable, what's not, how to do it. We've worked with the unions to get some of them into apprenticeship program. The whole goal is that we're giving them a skill that's usable, and at the same time, we're fixing the community. And so we are averaging about 75 houses a year we're knocking down now. And for many of these communities, these wrecks have been there for 20, 30, 40 years. So we're trying to address the communities where this is occurring. I've had some businessmen come into my office just yesterday about some ideas, but so much of my problem is that inability to scale it. Because one of the problems that we have all the time in our place is inherent in it. Most of you may or may not know this, but people confuse jails and prisons. They couldn't be any different. When someone enters a prison, you know almost to the minute when he's getting out. And so if you're thinking of trying to put together a program or a plan or something, you know when they're leaving, you can do it. Jails, you don't know if someone's leaving today or 10 years from now. I mean, unfortunately, in Cook County, because we're so great, we have guys that been waiting 8, 9 years for the trial. So, but I don't know which ones are going to be the 8, 9 year guys and which guys are going to be with me 10 days. And so we've had to come up with some creative ways to get programming that can still work even though someone might leave me. And so we're trying to build the hook in the community to still work with people after they leave me. But it's been a little bit tricky, but those numbers are horrible and they haven't changed. Yes?
I'm really excited to hear about this, like to actually get to hear and see that something of this nature is happening and you're trying to make it happen in this systemic depth. I expect to see you on TED Talks in a few years, so I'm really excited.
Yeah.
But
As long as I can do it from Cook County, because I don't travel.
what can I do as an individual? I mean, not just me, but I guess if I were to talk to the average Joe as far as contributing or supporting this kind of thing?
Well, you know, there's a couple things. Once, as I said, for some people, there's opportunities to actually work with us. For other people, there are some of the different groups that we work with that always are looking for assistance and advocacy and the rest. We work with NAMI, National Association of Mental Ill. We work with them all the time. They're great. Working with them, but it's interesting. I have found that people have creative skills that some of them don't even realize that they can help with. What I mean by that is we had a guy that came in, actually just came in to see our mental health treatment center. He was with a group just to see that. That was the only agenda, was to see it. And he was so moved by the thing that he is a photographer by trade. He decided to teach the detainees photography. And so he started that like 3 months ago, 4 months ago. The Tribune did a really nice piece on him. And now he's doing this really cool photography thing. And he's starting next week, which really is way above my pay scale. He's teaching Congo drums. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. I often tell people one of the beauties of the system, though, is it's so screwed up, we couldn't conceivably make it worse. So, why not try these things? But so much of it is giving these guys, and it's mostly men, so when I say men, it's because that's the majority of who I have there, but I have women as well. And the unfortunate thing, at least in my opinion, it's not just because I'm a guy, but the women seem to get a lot more focus. You know, when I have people offering to help, they seem to all want to gravitate toward helping women because I think it's easier to do that. I'm always great on that, but we have a lot of great women's programs that work with them on a lot of different areas. But the men is my largest, most difficult, complex issue. And so for people that have skill sets that feel that they can actually work in mentoring people within the jail confines, the guy that came in there, he was just on a tour, and he offered, and I was like, yeah. And it's one of the things about being the boss, it's cool, I can do whatever I want. I didn't have to go get like someone's permission. And so he's doing that, now he's branching into Congo drums. We have a couple of churches that have been really great. Willow Creek, is it? What's the one working in Division 9, Willow Creek? Yeah, they've been doing phenomenal things as well. So those are the type of things that come off the top of my head that would be a way that somebody can get engaged. Because it really is, it's something, I was in our legislature for 11 painful years. Oh my God, it was horrible. And they talk a lot, you know, and then they do stuff that you don't know if it gets realized. They think too big. We think smaller, and just can impact smaller groups of people. We can make a real positive difference. And if you want to reach out to before you leave, we can get you the numbers how to get a hold of us. Yes.
How's it going, sir? I just want to take the time to say thank you for coming out and talking to us. I've watched you on a couple of YouTube videos, so I just want to say thank you for doing what you do. My question is coming from a couple of my readings of a couple of different authors. In your time talking to some of the government officials, you know, and some of the individuals that you talk to, have you ever took the time to educate them and to let them know, hey, you know, if we spend our time boosting the economy and trying to create jobs, maybe we wouldn't have so many people coming into our jails. And basically educating them on how some of them tend to demonize some of these individuals so they literally can't do anything when they get out. So as you said earlier, with the example of the gentleman that said, hey, I'm probably going to go back to selling dope because that's what I can do because I don't have any other chance to do. Some of those people know the effects of some of this.
You know what's interesting? For some of them, I mean, honestly, I honestly think some of them don't care. I mean, I'm not really big into apologies for people. If you care, you get involved, you learn, you do things. If you don't care, you just keep going on your business. So some of them just objectively don't care, okay? That's A. But then the other ones, they get sort of caught up in either A, they want a grand plan, and the grand plans don't work. Or they get caught up in the nuances of, well, I'm going to be thought of as soft on crime, whatever it is. I went down to Springfield, and since I left there, I try never to go back down there for a myriad of good reasons. But I went down the last 2 years to passed a bill last year, and we're sort of tuning it up even more this year. We called it the Rocket Docket, and what it was is I got tired of wandering through the jail, talking to these poor people who are stuck in this system, not because they're bad, not because they committed a horrible offense, but they just can't get out. So what that bill says, if you were charged with retail theft or criminal trespass, that the state has 30 days to try you, or the case still goes on, but you don't sit in custody anymore just because you're poor, frankly. You can get electronic monitoring on your leg, or you can get an I-bond. The case still goes on. If you still really are all fired up to convict this guy of sleeping in O'Hare Airport, you can still do that. But it was trying to get inside the psyche of some of these other people in government saying, listen, if we can just carve away at the injustice of people sitting there for no reason. And so I went down there the other day to expand it to straight possession cases of dope that you aren't going to sit for more than 30 days. And my goal is to get them to start understanding that this system, our criminal justice system, A, is being misused, but it's being outrageously misused at a financial deficit for everybody. So for the ones that don't look at it as a moral issue, which I sort of think is the problem, but if they don't look at it that way, I'm trying to get them from the fiscal side of it. This is fiscally unsustainable. We cannot continue to arrest and house people like this. It's too expensive. Think about it. If a person sits in their jail cell and does nothing, he's not got a mental illness issue, he just sits there, doesn't cause any problems, that's $150 a day. I mean, you can go to a hotel that's really nice downtown for that. Do we want to continue to put $150 a day on a guy who's not violent, who's got an illness, exactly, and we're not treating him? We put him in the wrong place? No. So I've been trying to get at those folks in a couple different ways. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Karen Beyer, the Executive Director of the local Community Mental Health Center. And I'd like people to know that we here in Kane County, ourselves, the sheriff, and the state's attorney are trying to do some of the things that you are doing. One, we'd love to get some information from you that we might use locally.
We can get that too.
Great. And two, I would like to say to people in the audience, we are looking for grants, and we are also approaching the county to ask them to support our efforts, doing some of the things that Tom is doing already. So if you want to be a little politically active, please spread the word that now that you're really quite educated about this, talk to people on the county board, talk to Chris Laws, and tell him programs like this save money and they save lives.
It does. It saves money, saves lives. And you know the other part too, and I've made this point to everyone, we're the largest or second largest jail in the country. If we can pull it off, anybody can. I mean, we're so big. Usually that means you can't get anything done. You're too big. If we can do it, smaller jails can do it in a snap. They really can, and it really is not very expensive.
Here.
You think
Dr. Knopf.
yes, ma'am.
Hello. Quick question. In Cook County, there are some organizations that deal specifically with adults with disabilities, people with disabilities, Annexter Center, Access Living, those types of organizations. I'm wondering if there's a bridge between your office or your jail and any of these centers.
We work extensively with, as I mentioned, NAMI, they're an advocacy group, but we work with Thresholds, we work with TASK. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. There's really no group that we won't work with at all, and I probably couldn't give you the whole list of it, so I wouldn't be surprised if we're working with some of them, but I'll tell you what, if they're not working with them, it's not from lack of me not returning phone calls or like, I mean, I'll work with anybody who'll do it. That's what I said, initially I had this brainstorm that I said we can divert these people to the front end. I reached out to nursing homes, I was like, okay, we can work on this. And then someone said, you know, the insurance issue is a problem. I said, okay, I'll work on getting people signed up for insurance. And then the only hitch was the judges, and the judges are the judges. They move glacially, they are afraid of their own shadows. And there's a couple that are great, don't get me wrong, a couple great ones, but the larger group, they don't see it. So I love working with outside groups. We have some partnerships that are really well developed with some, other ones we keep adding. Payless Community Hospital is starting a partnership with us, actually imminently. We already mapped it out. They gave me zip codes of people that when I place them on electronic monitoring, home detention in those areas, they'll treat them. So if they have a mental illness, I say I have 2,500 on home confinement. If they're in their catchment zip code, they will treat them for free as their patient. So I'm developing more of this as we go along. Holy Cross Hospital has the same type of arrangement. So we're doing a lot of that, but I could be missing some groups.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you sent the template out for these programs to many places all over the country.
And I may have misspoken in this respect because what I wanted to do is, trust me, I'm not a physical world I live in, I'm not a perfectionist, but I wanted a video attachment to it because I didn't want it just to be literally this and some PDF or whatever it was. I wanted them to actually get the video of these things in operation. So it's been, we're at the finish line there. I rewrote the hard copy about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. That part's ready to go. That's done, but I want the other part with it. I want the video to go with it because to be honest with you, I figured more people will do it then. A lot of people don't read it; they like pictures. So I figured I'd do more of that. So, but it's done. It's done. It's ready. It's ready. We're there.
Okay, then I think I'll change my question up.
But we can get it to you if you're interested in whenever it's going to be ready imminently.
That would be great. So then when you do fully send this out, what kind of response do you expect to get? Do you think this will be implemented a lot? Do you think you'll get maybe some written responses back saying, hey, maybe we could change this, or I think this is great, we can do this? What do you think you'll get back?
That's a great question because it is interesting because one, start with just philosophically. There's certain, I bring a certain philosophy to the table. Sheriff Joe Arpaio brings a certain philosophy. Will he be interested in what I'm doing? Chances are probably not strong. Then start with that. Then there's other ones that I'll be honest with you will think that their facility is too small, that they don't really need to do it. Then there's going to be others that I'll be honest with you as well that they just do it a certain way, that they don't view that as their mission. My mission is I hold you when I have that piece of paper, I release you. What you do when you leave, not my issue. So I have really no good idea. I know the bigger jails. They say we have LA and New York at our place all the time now because they're taking parts of this and some more so than others. But the bigger ones are very interesting because they get it. It's going to save a ton of money. It's a humane thing to do. And then also, frankly, for a lot of them, they're involved with a lot of lawsuits. So I think it will help in the lawsuit world that you're out front on some of this stuff. The other ones, though, I don't know what the response is going to be. I don't know. I've told, Ben, I'm willing to, we can do some type of road show in the region if we need to, but I don't travel long.
What would you say the ethical issues related to this would be?
You know, one of the ethical issues that was proposed to me by, frankly, the lawyers and my own staff was, is that when I get an order to release somebody, I need to release them, and for every second I hold them beyond that, I'm accumulating liability issues. And they were discouraging some of the stuff I was doing on the outside because they're no longer in charge and bad things can happen. And so for me, it was more of an ethical issue, saying, listen, yeah, but I'm in a unique position. I can't just walk away from these people. So it was really more, I think the issue itself, it just is permeated with ethics. What do we think of our fellow man? Do we think that, you think about this, a government, any government, the most significant thing a government can do is to take your liberty away. You know, tax you, yeah, I think all the rest, taxes, zoning, and the rest of that fall underneath there somewhere. If we're going to be taking people's liberty away, I would hope we're the most scrupulous society in the world in doing that. And what we have found out is that it's not. It's not because of a bad person. It's just because it's a system, and the system doesn't look at individuals. And so I think the entire criminal justice system needs to be looked at in a way of an ethical framework. Are we operating ethically and morally? And so I think it permeates everything that we're talking about here. I don't really know where there isn't a part of it.
We got it's on now? Okay, good. I'm going to go ahead and close this off with one more question, and there's a guy here who's been waiting for a long time. So I'm going to give him a chance here. And I'll have a couple things to say after him.
Thank you, appreciate it. In your opinion, what role do you believe that the privatized prison industry has played into the increased rate of incarceration in our country? And can you also explain to the audience what a private prison is?
Sure. In some states, there has been a wave of privatization. Privatization means is that basically the state contracts out to a private company, a for-profit company, to operate a prison, for example. Certain states are really big. Texas is big, and a couple of other states are really big. Illinois, it's always been illegal, frankly. It's in statute, you can't have it here. And so most of my interaction with it has been from afar. It hasn't been an issue per se here. The way it's played out more often than not, and once again, you just do the logic in it. The logic is that you make money by having more people in your jail or prison, and you make more money by paying the people operating it as little as you have to, So, we have issues in our jail, other people have issues in their jails. In the for-profit ones, there seems to be more issues, and when I say seems, I can't emphasize enough to you. Once again, getting back to what I was saying earlier, when you talk about the most significant thing a government can do, taking someone's liberty away, you would think it would be the most scrupulously analyzed area of the country. It's not. I mean, I had a DOS-based computer system when I started. Other places, they don't track anything. I mean, literally, they don't track anything. So there's a little bit of it you're left with anecdote, but it's more than anecdote. In the private prison scenarios, you find that there's heightened issues, frequently on abuse issues. So it hasn't been an issue here because of the fact it's by statute illegal, but in some states, I believe there's a couple states where all they have is private prisons. And then there's a whole line of thinking as well that it's in their vested interest to make sure people keep being brought in. And I mean, there's a logic there at least. I don't think anybody's ever connected the dots where this lobbyist was advocating for this for purposes of filling the jail and prison, but they really haven't, no one's had to do that because the system's already doing that. And that's the part, the final thing I'll say is that I found the most insidious about how the criminal justice system is being contorted here. There isn't, you can't point to one bad person, because if you could, it's already easy then. Let's unelect that person, then this problem's solved. It isn't. It's a benign neglect is what's happening here. People are unaware, the data systems don't really exist, they're not easy to access, and underlying it is that we rightfully feel we live in the greatest country in the world. And so, feeling that way, we can sit there and spit out all the due process that's woven through our Constitution, so we can go to bed at night saying, the only people in the criminal justice system are people who deserve to be there because our system is set up to make sure of that. It's not working. It's not working. And so it's counter to most people's feelings that that can be going on in their own country, but that's what's happening. I see it every day. And so, the private prison thing is an interesting one because a lot of people have really pushed on that hard. They're usually the ones living in those states, though, because they have the data. we haven't had to confront that, but it adds another level of sort of, you know, I don't know, another level of concern, put it that way. Another level of concern, that's the motivating factor going on in some of those places. But once again, I haven't had to enter into that, not because they're not here, but because it's already dysfunctional. Whatever the case is, there are too many people coming in for the wrong reason.
Okay, I think we all like to thank Sheriff Dart for his Sheriff, would you mind sticking around for a few minutes, or do you have to get out of here, or? Okay, so if there are some other questions left over and you would like to ask them, come down here and ask them, please feel free. Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for being here. Oh my gosh, that's so good. Oh yeah, you can get the Good, she had sent it out to me. Oh, okay. Right, you know, it's one of those things. You don't have to defer anything. I just sat down, so I'm like, I'm lazy. Hey! Your hair looks so cute again. You always, every time. I love it. Like, yeah, but it always looks good every time. Like, I go like this. This is so interesting. Oh, who you were sitting with?
I was sitting and there was like ECC, so she even said right next to it. So I asked her, first one was
Sure.
and I said, so what, are you doing? And she says, well, she's getting ready to go. And I do, she said she was in service at 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And then she went back to school. She's just getting back in school full time.
Okay, great.
And so she said that she's gonna be going to.
Oh, really?
But then I said, so what's her name?
Yeah.
She said, Sherrif. So, okay, I said, all right. Then after a while, I said, so what's your last name? She told me, it's Sherrif. She said, do you know I write on the district?
Oh, my gosh.
I said, he's on my committee. She's like, that's ridiculous. I said,
Oh my gosh, women is that small of a world. That's why she came to sit like right there.
I said to her, I said, are you not Luana? She said, no, that's my twin. I said, I just talked to Luana the other day.
No.
Listen, I was looking, we've been looking for her. She's working at the Western. Since January, so for some reason, it was in my mind.
Oh my goodness.
Got credit.
Oh, it completely got a moment. Are you kidding me?
It said, oh, okay. So I'm like, well, what is that? Then I said, you know what? He lived in the Wheaton area. Like 23 years. And said, because I knew he had a church in Harrison. So he lived up there. And so I told him, for the party, he said, here's the one. Give her a call. I gave her a call. She said, well, I know where they live.
Right.
And she said, and then when I was in school, I lived at Summerville. We went to Burlington, and you know, last weekend. Oh, it was just amazing.
We call it God wink. You know that guy who is a God wink. It's a God.
Fire when it's because when I saw Pastor Allen last night, he said, so one of the things you were Patterson, favor of God.
Oh my God, it's so wonderful. Yeah, that's so, yeah, and then why did she come like that? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that I cannot deny.
Oh, I told her, and you, because Joyce gave me contact, and then Dr. Bates Jones. So I told her, you know, she said, you were talking about. I said, find her office, or you see her in the hall.
Yeah.
You just talk.
Did she leave before